One of the main features of the Spring Boot Gradle plugin is its ability to package the project as an executable jar or a WAR file. In this lesson, we'll walk through two demonstrations that illustrate the power of the boot repackage task within the Spring Boot Gradle plugin. If we expand the Gradle task tab, you'll notice that within the build subdirectory, we have the boot repackage task. This task can be used to create an executable jar or a WAR file. It is provided by the Spring Boot Gradle plugin. Thanks to the build ship integration, all we need to do is right-click on the task and hit Run Gradle Tasks. This will execute our Gradle task and we will see its progress within the Gradle Executions tab. Eventually, our classes will get compiled and then our application will be packaged as an executable jar. If we minimize the Gradle Executions tab and we click on the Project Explorer and hit F5, you'll notice that our directory structure will now include the build directory. And within the build directory, you will see a starter-project-gradle jar file. Now you'll see the snapshot versioning information also on that jar file. But this was the executable jar file that was constructed by the boot repackage task within the Spring Boot Gradle plugin. If we would like to more closely inspect this jar file, we can open a terminal using the Quick Access toolbar. So just type terminal and then select the terminal view. Within the Terminal tab, we'll be presented with a command line that has navigated to the root of our starter project Gradle directory. From this directory, we can change to the build directory, and then we can navigate into the lib directory, and that directory is actually libs. So from the libs directory, if we inspect, you'll notice that we have our jar file. And we can further explore this jar file by using the jar command and then supplying the tf option and then putting the name of our actual jar file. And here you'll see all of the classes and the other libraries that are packaged within this self-executing jar. So there we see our embedded Tomcat container. We see the library for that container. We also see some libraries from Spring, such as the Spring Web MVC library. And this is the nature of a self-executing jar. Everything that we need to execute our application is packaged within this large Uber jar file. Now, this is in contrast to the conditional approach of building out a WAR file, which is then deployed to a standalone container. I'm going to go ahead and clear our console. And then you'll see from within the console, I can use the java-jar command to actually launch our jar file. So here I'm just using basic command line to launch our self-executing jar, and this will launch our application. Now let's return to our console, and what we're going to do now is we're going to look at how we can modify the build.gradle file within our editor to package our application as a WAR file instead of a jar file. So the first thing we'll do within the build.gradle file is we will include the WAR plugin, and this will allow us to provide the WAR task, which we're just going to go ahead and switch over our jar task to a WAR task. And within this task, we can provide different properties. And the properties available to us are actually the base name and the version. So it's very similar to the jar file in the fact that they have these two properties in common, and we're just going to leave those in place. Finally, we'll also need to add an additional block to specify that our runtime is provided to us. So we will add a configurations block or closure. And within that block, all we need to do is say provided at runtime, and this will indicate that our container will be available at runtime, and we do not need to have it packaged within our war file as a library. So now with the war plugin applied in our build.gradle file and the war task being invoked, we can go ahead and execute the boot repackage task on the Spring Boot Gradle plugin, and this will cause our application to be packaged as a war instead of as an executable jar file. So simply navigate to the Gradle Tasks tab and then right-click on the Boot Repackage task and hit Run Gradle Tasks. And here we can see its execution, and you'll see that we have quickly created our war file. And if we navigate to our Package Explorer and we now refresh our project, and you can do that by hitting F5 or right-clicking and choosing Refresh, we now have a war file that we could in fact deploy to a container such as Tomcat. So in this lesson, we took a look at the boot repackage task within the Spring Boot Gradle plugin, and we saw how it allows us to package our application for various forms of distribution.